Welcome to Unbreakable Latina.
Hi guys, welcome back to Unbreakable Latina. This is your host Melina. I hope you're having an amazing day, whatever day you're listening to this on. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. It's Friday. I'm recording from my room. As you can see, I was going to record in the living room, but then there was a lot of noise. These mics are really good. It picks up on like the dogs and someone is lighting fireworks. I didn't do a podcast episode. What was it? 2 weeks ago. I ended up replaying my love bombing episode. I actually listened to it and I had forgotten about all the things I've been through. Girl, I've been through it. And it was just a reminder of how far I've come and the things that have happened in my life and just the lessons I've learned in dating. And I hope it resonated with some of you, or just if you're getting into dating, don't get love bombed like I have been. I really wanted to do an episode, but I don't know. I was just busy enjoying La Vida Loca. Took my mom to see, what did we go see? Banda Recodo, Banda Recoditos, Banda Machos. It was so cool. On Valentine's Day. And I spent it with my mom and my sister. We went to the concert. We were celebrating my mom's birthday. Then when we came back, I was leaving to Mexico on Monday or Tuesday. So everything was just like, go, go, go. I had like a week and a half off work and life is worth living. It was nice to just shut my brain from the workforce and just disconnect. What I did notice cuando estaba en Mexico es que mucha gente sí convive. You could tell we're American because we're on our phones. As I observe people, as I slowed down, I realized that people in Mexico conviven mucho, platican mucho. Y la mera verdad, every time that I was listening to their conversations, they were like deep conversations. Hablaban de la salud mental, hablaban de goals that they had, metas que tenían. It was just really nice and a breath of fresh air. Being in Mexico made me realize that I really need to dial it down, dial it back with my social media intake, because I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's been rough. It's been rough to stay off social media. Listen, that's the way I get my news, which maybe is not a good thing, but I also hate watching the news. And my job is already so like emotionally draining that news after I get out of work is just so heavy for me. And I rather not. So I just scroll, doom scroll, doom scroll. And I've caught myself like, why do I do this? Like I wake up and that's the first thing that I do. But because I'm so like, well, what's going on in the world now? Like, what chaotic thing has happened? It's exhausting. And I realize that. And I also have a personal Instagram aside from my Unbreakable Latina one. And yesterday, on Thursday, I had a conversation with my brother and I was sharing with him how I realized that a lot of people in Mexico que conviven más and they're not on their phones as much. They're very present. That's what I wanted to say. They're very present. And that's something that I feel lately we're losing here. I'll be having, I don't know, let's say like my brother comes over and my niece and we're talking and all of a sudden my brother starts scrolling and then I start scrolling and my mom starts scrolling. And then like there's times where we are playing with my niece, but there's other times where she's watching TV or something and we're all just sitting there like hanging out. And I'm just like, is this like what we're supposed to do? I don't think humans were supposed to just sit down and isolate, and it can get very lonely even though you're present. Even though you're physically present, you're not mentally present. Anyways, that's just my 2 cents on I'm trying to be better. I deactivated my personal Instagram because I was like, what's the point? And if I'm going to consume social media, it's going to be for my podcast, for my business, and just things like that. Like, hope that me sharing that makes you think of twice about doom scrolling, because we could be doing so much more. What else has happened? I don't know, like it's just been a while. Oh my god, the Super Bowl. Like I didn't even talk about the Super Bowl. Bad Bunny was amazing. Guess what, guys? Voy a España a mirar a Bad Bunny. Yep, it's true. My friend Karina and I were watching the Super Bowl together. Y nos entró la locura and we're just like, we should go see him. And she's like, yeah, like, let's go see him. And she's like, let's do it. Yo, you really want to do it? And she's like, do you really want to do it? And she's like, okay, let's just buy a ticket. So we bought tickets. We haven't even planned the trip yet, but we have tickets to see Bad Bunny in España. So if you're going to Spain, let me know. I'm really excited, kind of nervy about going to a concert somewhere else. I did a rebranding for the podcast. Well, like half of my rebranding, a photo shoot. I'm working on a rebranding. It's been a long time coming. It's been in my mind for a while. My sister is my marketing genius and a year. So finally our schedules lined up and we're able to get together. We took some pictures. It came out really good. She like did it so quick. We booked up here space for 2 hours and just got it done. I already have my pictures. I just have to, decide which ones I want to post. I'm excited. I don't know. Like I've been more lenient on myself in regards to the podcast and everything I want to accomplish because I'm the type of person that wants to do quiero hacer todo en un día, quiero hacer todo en una noche. And I've learned that that's impossible, working a full-time job and still dedicating time to my family and my friends. So recently, I don't know if I talked about it on the podcast, but I watched the Becky G documentary Rebecca on Netflix. I expect to cry watching the Becky G documentary on Netflix as much as I cried. And I'll tell you why. It was very relatable. She's such a hard worker. She's so inspiring. I don't know, since it started, like I just felt un nudo en mi garganta. Like it felt a knot in my throat and I just felt like I don't know, was it my period? No sé, pero andaba bien emocional. And then she starts talking about her father and how he suffered with addiction for so long and how hurt she was and she cried. And let me tell you, I can relate to that. When Becky G started talking about her dad and how much his addiction affected her and what it did to her family. And there's this scene where she's like, but what about us? Like, why don't you care about us? Or something like that. Girl, I was a mess. I was sobbing. And just thinking of everything I've been through. And if you're new here and you haven't listened to any of my old episodes, I share a little bit about how I don't speak to my dad and some reasons why I don't. I don't know how in depth I went into it. I think I've always been very afraid to talk about this subject because, it's my family and they probably don't want me to talk about this. But at the same time, this is my story. I think in the beginning, my mom was a little like hesitant when I started talking about my dad and his addiction. And she was kind of, I don't know if it's embarrassment. I don't know if it's like protection of him still or like protection of our family. But it's something that's not talked about, addiction in Latino families. And as much as it makes me sad to admit, addiction has been around in my family for ages. And I'm sure many of you can relate. Being an alcoholic mostly is like the most common thing that happens in Latino families. It's normalized. Oh, es el tío borracho. Oh, ya se le pasaron las copas. It's funny. And, you grow up thinking that's normal. And growing up, I had uncles that were addicts that lived in the same household as me. As a kid, you don't really understand why they act the way they act. Like, there's a lot of my childhood that's cloudy. I'm not saying I had a horrible childhood because I don't believe I had a horrible childhood. Was I put in situations that I shouldn't have been put as a kid? Yes. Yes, I was. I had two uncles that my mom helped raise. So watching them go through addiction, watching them be in and out of jail all the time, it was hard. It was hard, but it was normal. I just didn't understand when I was little. Looking back now, I'm like, wow, that's crazy that I went through that. And it's just something that, people don't talk about. And it's kind of shameful. It is shameful to talk about because nobody wants to admit that their loved one is an addict of drugs or alcohol. In my case, my dad was, I wouldn't say I guess you could call him an alcoholic, but he wasn't like, to me, it was normal. Growing up, my dad always had tall cans. He drank. He just chilled in the porch and he just pounded some beers. He would get home from work and he would drink a tall can. To me, as a kid, that was normal. And I didn't realize that it was wrong till I got older. And then my dad's addiction to alcohol became an addiction to gambling. The way that addiction affects the whole family is insane. And I'm not making this podcast to bash my father, my dad, or to embarrass my family, but it's something that when I saw Becky G open up about it, I realized that I have opened up about it, but I haven't revisited the subject because when I started the podcast, that was really hard for me. It was hard because it was like therapeutic to talk about it. It's one of the first times that I ever really said it out loud, especially to the world. And I'm sure people that know my family heard it. So I try to tread lightly. I wanted to protect everyone's feelings. I don't remember exactly what I've said. I know I've done a couple, like maybe 2 episodes. But dealing with someone who's an addict that you love and that you knew before addiction, it's heartbreaking. It's hard. I've done an episode on mourning someone who's still alive because that's what I've been doing. I feel like just like when you mourn someone that passes away, mourning someone who is an addict is almost the same thing. And as the days go by, as the months and the years go by, you learn to live without them. And it's easier for me to talk about him these days. But when I was going through it, when I discovered that my dad had a drug addiction, and for a lot of years, we just kept silent. And we didn't talk about it. No one knew about it. Only my immediate family knew about it. But even then, I was probably like, what? I was in high school when I discovered it. When the whole family discovered it, meaning just my brother, I don't know if my sister knew. She was too little. She knew something was wrong, but I don't think she realized what it was until she got older. I was in high school. My brother was in college. And my mom was just trying her best to save the love of her life. And I was trying to save my dad. I wanted my old dad back because even though he wasn't perfect, he was a great dad. And it was just a battle of, I don't know, when you go through addiction in a family, like one of your family members has an addiction, it's just hard, especially when it's your parent. So if you are a sibling or a daughter or a son of an addict, my heart goes out to you because it's hard. And it's hard because no one likes to talk about it. No one likes to admit it. Everybody keeps telling you like, oh, you have to help them because that's your family member. That's your dad. That's your brother. That's your sister. And as much as you try to help them, you can't. You can't help someone that doesn't want the help themselves. They have to want it. And I know there's a lot of stories where people become sober and they do a 360 and change their lives around. And I have hope. I have this much hope that one day that's going to happen to my dad. Dealing with someone who's an addict, you take a lot of responsibility. You grow up faster. Sometimes I think about, I don't know, all the things I could have been enjoying while I was in college, but instead I was just worried about, is my dad okay? And even though at that time I didn't know how bad drugs were, like, you have an idea, but I was always kind of like a good kid. And I never did drugs. I didn't know what it was to be drugged. I just knew, to me, it was just like you're addicted to something and like it takes control of your body. But I didn't understand it. And I didn't understand why it was so easy for him to choose drugs instead of choosing his family. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when you beg someone you love to become sober. And if you're going through this, I feel for you. Just know that there's nothing you can do to change them. And I know that's like that's like a stab at the heart, but it's true. We can keep trying to save people. My mom has brothers that are addicts and they've been addicts. And, I think of like, what if my siblings were ever in that position and you want to help them? You want to help them all the time, but one day you just give up. And people are like, how can you give up on your dad? It's like, you don't know what it's like to, I don't know, be in school and then come home and your dad is high and just playing music loud and you're trying to go to sleep. And it was just chaotic. So when I saw that documentary, I just felt so seen and I felt like I needed to do an episode on this because I don't know, like it's just something that people don't talk about. It's something that people don't relate to. There was this time where I was at Macy's, maybe like a year and a half ago. And this lady comes up to me and she's like, "You have a podcast, huh?" And I was just like, no, she goes, "I know you." Yo no te conozco, señora. Yo no te conozco. ¿Qué dice? And she was like, "You have a podcast, huh?" And I'm like, well, she's like, "My niece listens to your podcast, specifically the episodes about your dad." She's like, "My brother, he's the same as your dad." I remember I was just like, "What the heck?" And she's like, "You help my niece out so much." So that's why I wanted to revisit that subject. When I watched the documentary, I put a little clip about the documentary, how I felt seen by Becky G. She followed me. I was so excited. How I felt so seen because no one understands unless unless you have an addict in your family, or especially like when it's a parent. Like I don't know, like it's just different. I'm sure a sibling is just as hard, but when it's your parent and when you know that at some point your parent was normal and they weren't a drug addict, you mourn that person that you used to know. The way I think about my dad is I think about who he was before drugs, and I miss that guy. I miss the other guy too, but that one caused too many problems. I like the normal him. Um, I do think that it's hard to talk about in Latino families, and then people be like, "No le vayas a decir a nadie. Don't tell anybody." And that's one thing that in my family, my mom was very like, "We're not going to talk about this. We're going to pretend everything's fine." For years, we pretended that my dad didn't have an addiction. Like he just lost his job one day. One day I just snapped and I was like, "Why are we lying to everybody?" But that's when I grew up. But if I was younger, I was already like in college when I snapped at my mom. If I was younger, I probably would have just been like, "That's just my dad. That's just who he is. I can't talk about it." But the thing is that when you deal with an addict, you have to grow up fast, especially having an addict parent. You have to grow up fast. You take on responsibility, and you and everybody else sees you like, "Oh my gosh, she's so mature for her age." In our culture, we are taught to protect the image of the family. And I think that's why my mom was so against us speaking to anyone about what was going on at home. But no one understood what was going on. I think that I became very angry during those years because I was so tired. It was a constant, like, what version am I going to get today when I go home? Am I going to be able to sleep peacefully? Is he going to be calm? Is he going to mind his business and just do his thing? Or is he going to play his music loud where I can't sleep? Is he going to go off on me? It was just a constant, like, walking on eggshells. And even when I think about it now, I have forgotten a lot of things that I've been through, but they were very traumatizing. It was very traumatizing. Like, sometimes I think about the life that I lived. Like, it just feels like something that never happened. It feels like something that I went through. It was like un sueño, una pesadilla mala, like a bad dream. It feels like a bad dream that I went through while I was going to college. I remember like hacking my dad's bank account so that way he wouldn't blow all his money on gambling and drugs. That way we could have food on the table. So that way we could pay the mortgage. Like, if the FBI is watching this, don't arrest me. But that's what I did because I was like in survival mode. I was trying to, have a roof over my head and me, my mom, my sister's head. I just felt this responsibility to save my family and save my dad. I wanted him to get better so bad. And in that, and in the midst of all the chaos, I completely, I just checked out. Like, I think that at the time I was going out a lot because I didn't want to be home because I didn't want to deal with it. And I could even say that the reason that I stayed in a long-term relationship was because I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to be at home. That was like my way out. It was just my escape. I wanted to do this episode to make someone feel less alone. If you have a loved one that's an addict, I know that you want to save them. And I know that you would give anything for them to be sober. But the harsh truth is that if they don't want help, you can't help them. And it's heartbreaking. It is. I do remember begging my dad, begging him, please, dad, get sober. Like, we'll take you. Because in Tijuana, they have rehabs where they actually like have to stay there, lo internan, and they can't get out. Right here, everything's optional. But my dad would say no and no. And I remember one last time, like, I begged him. I said, please, dad, please. Like, I threatened him. I said, if you don't get sober, you have to choose between me or drugs. And unfortunately, he was like, I can't. I'm going to choose drugs. And I remember I was like crying and I was just like my heart just broke because in that moment, like, I knew that he was gone. He was far gone. Like, my dad, I was a daddy's girl. Like, we were like this. We're a lot alike. We're both little chistosos, but that day was a day that I don't know how old I was. I want to say, oh my god, I'm already crying again. He chose addiction over his family. He chose addiction over me. I remember telling him, like, what if I have kids one day? You don't want to be part of their lives. What if I get married? Like, you don't want to be there? Like, I want you there, but I want you to be sober. And, like, I only want to have a relationship with you if you're sober. And he said, okay, that's your choice. So he made his choice. And I made my choice. And as much as it was hard, after you've been dealing with someone who's an addict for so long, even though it breaks your heart, like, you can't keep breaking your heart. It's a constant cycle. It's like a toxic relationship. They say sorry. They say they're going to get better. And then they don't. And they do it again. And they do it again. There's only so many times that you can take that person back. It's emotionally draining to try to save somebody when they don't want to be saved. Having a parent who is an addict helped shape me, unfortunately. I had to be careful with who I trusted with that information in the beginning. Then one day I decided to do a podcast and talk about it to the whole world. But in the beginning, it was hard. It was hard to like open up to my friends because no one understood why I didn't speak to my dad and to be like, Melina, pero es tu papá. Like, that's your dad. How can you not speak to him? Or I had friends who didn't have their dads and was like, if I had my dad, I would talk to him. Why don't you talk to your dad? And one day I just finally snapped and I'm like, because my dad's an addict. And the more I said it, the easier it was to talk about, the easier it was for me to mourn that loss. I feel like I was put in a lot of situations where I shouldn't have, that were not my responsibility. Mind you, I put myself there, but as a, I was like, I don't know, and I was like 17, 18, 19, from 17 all the way till I turned like 28, 29 is when I was dealing with all this. For it was a long time. Even though there's a lot of negative that comes from having an addict parent, there was a lot of things that I learned. I learned how to be resilient. I learned empathy. I learned boundaries. I learned the importance of breaking cycles. And I think the biggest cycle that I broke is to talk about it, to talk about addiction, to talk about the things that I've struggled with, having an addict father, mourning someone who's alive. During the time where I still had a relationship with my dad, I felt like he caused a lot of isolation with all family members. Like, my mom did her own thing, my brother did his own thing, my sister did did her own thing. We wouldn't talk about it. We'd just pretend like nothing was happening, because if we didn't talk about it, it didn't exist. But then things would happen and everybody would kind of just like, I'd go to my ex-boyfriend's house. My brother didn't even live with us. My little sister was just busy with like college and like high school, and she was involved in everything because obviously she didn't want to be home. Who wanted to be home to deal with that? Nobody. And when we were all going through all that, I was losing my mind. And I remember that, I don't know who told me about it. I think I was going to therapy, and my therapist recommended me to go to this like support group. And it was a support group. I think it was called like NAR. It started with the N, but it was for family members of addicts. I used to live in a city that was predominantly white. And I remember walking into that support group, and I stuck out like a sore thumb. First of all, most of the people that were there were, I don't know, like grandpas and grandmas that were dealing with sus nietos que eran adictos, sus hijos, white granny, grandpa, and then it's me, little Mexican Melina, college student, fresh out of college. And we all like everybody shared their story, like, hi, I'm here because my son is an addict, and he's been an addict for this many years, and he has had overdoses and all these things. So you sit there and you listen to everybody, and then it's your turn to share your story. So, oh my God, this was before my public speaking days, so it was hard for me to open up. But you know what? I was like, nobody knows me. I'm never going to run into these people again unless I come here. So I talked about it. I said, my dad's an addict. And saying it out loud was like, oh shit. Like in a room full of strangers. It was real. And I think that helped me so much because it made me feel seen. It made me feel heard. It made me feel like, okay, like people go through this. My family is not an isolated incident. Like this is normal, unfortunately, that it happens all around. So if you have someone who is an addict and you don't know who to talk about, first of all, therapy, and there's support groups out there, and it's hard. And the only advice I could give to you is break the cycle, open up, talk about it. Yeah, we want to protect the family image because ¿qué va a decir la gente? But at the same time, it's like, te estás ahogando solito, solita. I remember how I felt. Like I felt like I couldn't be my true self because none of my family knew what was going on. And until people found out what was going on, everybody was like, psh, that's why. That's why Melina acts like that. Por eso rebelde. Porque, you know, I was so angry. I was so angry that I had to deal with that. I really was. But through the years and through therapy and through talking about it, I feel like I've been coping with it better, but it's just a hard subject. And like I said, it's not something that's normal to talk about. And I wanted to talk about it. This is not an episode for you guys to feel sorry for me or anything like that. But just know that a lot of us go through things like that. And if you felt alone with dealing with an addict, you're not alone. It happens all the time. But like I said, at some point, you just have to realize that if they don't want to help, if they don't want the help, you can't help them. Having an addict as a parent, whether it's drugs or alcohol, it's so sad. Because you know that they're probably a good person deep inside, just lost control over themselves. Like God knows whatever they've been through. I always think about that. I always think like, why did my dad choose that life? Like what hurt him so bad that he needed to numb himself? And I think when you get to that level of compassion and empathy, you slowly begin to cope with it. I'm not saying it's gone because obviously like you guys saw me crying, but you really like learn to live with it, and you learn to just, you know, like it's not about you. One thing that I will say is that sometimes people blame themselves, like, oh, what could I have done better so that person didn't become an addict? Like, where did I go wrong? You try to take responsibility for the fact that it's a disease. It's a disease that you cannot cure yourself. There's nothing you can do to stop it. Just know that your feelings are valid if you've been through this or are going through this. It's okay to not speak to that person, your loved one who's an addict. It's okay to remove yourself from that situation. It's okay to establish boundaries. My boundary was he didn't get sober, then I couldn't have a relationship with him, and he hasn't gotten sober. So I don't have a relationship with him. And yes, it was hard. It was really hard in the beginning. Like, I remember I would cry about it. Like, I still cry on Father's Day. I still think of him on his birthday. I find myself lately talking about him a lot. But like, oh, my dad used to do this. Or my dad, do you think my dad would have liked this? Or like, would he have liked my podcast? And he probably wouldn't have. He'd probably be like, ¿para qué le andas platicando a toda la gente tus traumas? But I think about him in another light, and that comes with time. It's not gonna happen overnight. And I hope that one day he does get sober and he comes back into my life. That's always been a hope of mine. I don't know if it's gonna happen, but I don't lose hope. Just remember, amiguis, that if you're going through this, you're not alone. Seek support, whether it's therapy, whether it's support groups, or just start a conversation. Maybe like, let's say your siblings don't talk about it, because for a long time, I'm not gonna lie, my siblings, they don't like talking about it, and I'm the one that's like yappy because I started this podcast and I started talking about it, and like slowly we talk about it, and it's not as like, they don't shut down as much as they used to. And I used to talk about my dad. I think I'm the one that has been able to cope with it faster. I don't know why. Maybe it's because like how hard I fought my dad, but it's been something that I've had to live with. And there's other people that go through it, and your family's not the only one going through it. So don't feel alone, don't feel ashamed, don't feel like you have to protect them or save them. I mean, you could try, but one day you're gonna know when you can't try anymore. Or one day they're going to get sober. And that's the hope that I have for everyone who's struggling with drugs, that one day they get sober. Thank you guys so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode like I enjoyed recording and sharing my story. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Follow me at Unbreakable Latina on TikTok and on Instagram. And I hope you guys stay tuned for the new rebranding of Unbreakable Latina. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Los quiero mucho. Bye.